Will Smith hits golf shots off a pier into the Hudson River, and an empty Manhattan is the backdrop. He goes to an empty video rental store to talk to mannequins he's set up as other customers. He walks through empty streets and buildings in a post-pandemic world in which he believes he is the only person alive. At night, he locks himself in his apartment, defense against the monstrous versions of humans allergic to light affected by the virus that killed almost everyone. Those scenes are from the 2007 film I Am Legend, loosely based on a book from the 1950s. In it, Smith's character, a scientist, has daily routines, which include experimenting on infected rats to see if he can find a cure to the virus that has decimated the world, searching for food and supplies, walking with his German shepherd, Samantha, on their rounds, and broadcasting a daily radio message in hopes that any human that could be alive might hear it and meet him at the appointed time. What struck me at first when I saw this film, and again reviewing it during this pandemic, were three things. One, that Neville is disciplined in his routine. In order to stay sane and focused on finding a cure for the virus, he repeats his actions daily. He doesn't lose sight of the detail of his survival, the small things that could save the mutant humans that ravage the night and anything else alive. And two, he doesn't give up. Life is about as hard as it gets for him. His family is gone, no other human in sight. He has no reason to believe there are any others who survive, but he still spends his day broadcasting on the radio and meeting no one at the South Street seaport. Even after losing his trusty companion, his only friend, his dog, in the middle of the film, and he doesn't give up. Anyone who knows, who's lost a dog or a pet or anyone during this pandemic can relate to the despair of that moment, but he doesn't give up. And three, lastly, what struck me was this film wasn't about rugged individualists who survive despite all that happens. It's about a person and a community that survives because of what happens. When his broadcasts are finally responded to, the goal for him is not isolation, stiff upper lip, salvation by character, but salvation by the renewed love of community. The last scene in the film is an aerial shot of the few humans who have walled off a small town in Vermont. The aerial shot panning away from that little community with the little white church, the classic white church in the center, symbolic of the future, starting in the seed of a community of love and survival. Because it's Lent, I want to talk to you about discipline, a classic Lenten theme. Now, discipline gets a bum rap because we think of it as the impossible task of living on the edge of self-sacrifice and restraint. I used to think that discipline was beating myself up about my weight or my physical training campaign, my need to sit upright and hard in a position of Zen meditation, as if somehow the harder I meditated, the closer to enlightenment I would get. When I realized that discipline is commitment to something bigger than myself and ultimately to being part of something bigger so that it feeds my heart and soul, I was liberated. I realized that there was a balance between the stiff upper lip discipline of life. The Buddhists say it is like a stringed instrument, how we should live, not too tight and not too loose, balanced with the effect that we have on our communities. Discipline is being part of missions we are on, not being the mission itself. I realized that the more creative the project, the more discipline was needed. For sure, the more effective they were, but not for my own salvation, but only in service to others. Writers know something about this. When in a writing project, I would create a schedule that would not bend to whimsy. I'd be up early and writing for 4 or 5 hours, only easing up to other activities so that I could churn through my thoughts for the rest of the day. Forrest Church, a prolific UU minister, told me once that when he was writing a book, he'd be up at 3 or 4 in the morning. He would go to church. He would write straight till staff meeting at 9. He'd work on the church till 5, go home for dinner with his family, and get to bed at 6. The amazing Toni Morrison, the writer who many of us have read, is said to have spent every day that she was writing a book in a hotel room with a chair, a pen, a pad, a bottle of cognac, and 6 hours a day of writing. She wrote transformational books like Beloved and Sula like this in her hotel room. But the books weren't about her hard-nosed discipline. They were about service to something bigger. She understood her commitment needed discipline and not the other way around. David Brooks, who I've been reading a lot lately, talks about discipline in 3 ways. He says, what disciplines a commitment is, 1, to see the truth, to see it clearly and plainly, to observe and commit to what you see without self-delusion, to learn to see clearly, to use science and math and methods and writings as our models, observers of the world who can enter into someone else's understanding. Try that practice when you can. Try to understand someone else's feeling. Try to see something from their perspective. I used to do this on mass transit in Boston and in the Berkeley area. I would sit on the subway and try to imagine the person sitting across from me looking back at me, observing from another perspective. Writers do this all the time. Toni Morrison was written about by the New Yorker, and they said, when she looked at you and addressed you by your Christian name, she made it sound like a promise. One that stood on the side of everything that was juicy, smart, black, amused, yours. Consider Toni Morrison as a writer. She believed that storytelling was the best way to learn anything. In the book Beloved, one of my favorite books of all time, there's a character named Sixo. He's one of 6 male slaves at the Sweet Home plantation in Kentucky. And he's a confident person. He comes from and has grown up in Africa. He knows his roots and culture. He is gentle. He speaks English, but he tries to keep alive his African way of life, replicating the cooking methods of his country and the traditions. He goes to meet his lover, Patsy, by walking 60 miles in 34 hours with only an hour of rest and time enough to say hello to what he calls his 30-mile woman. Sixo has the qualities of strength and endurance as a loving and patient person who cherishes his lover and his funny mistakes that make him human. Here Morrison points to an alternative masculinity that is at once both strong and humane in this beautiful book. Now, I'm sure that Morrison knew men like Sixo, but to know men like Sixo and to write about their inner struggles and emotions, the emotions of someone living in a different time, takes more than proximity. It takes curiosity as a discipline. It takes learning. It takes listening. It takes valuing the truth of others rather than what we want to create about others. This is the root of our dismantling racism work that starts with us. It is the root of the discipline of a commitment that tries to see the truth. Brooks' second disciplining a commitment says it takes craft, practicing the craft of your own, from writing to life, conversation, observation, service, or the many things that you're committed to. They take practice. They take time. They need not you to be owned by your mission. Rather, the craft calls you to own the mission and the craft. And Brooks's last point, maybe more important than the others, is to discipline a commitment. We need community. We are responsible for our communities, he says, for their quality and their care, for their standards of behavior and their impacts. He says that in the U.S., 10 years ago, we've moved from trusting our neighbors, the survey said, at a level of 66% to today that is under 30%. It is our responsibility to be part of and to lead our communities, to start in service to our neighbors in any way we can, from tutoring children to read to doing kind acts for people who live around us, to service our communities. That service looks like, in the church, members of the church like Sarah, who would, on her own volition, bring the ministers tea on Christmas Eve, an act of kindness that made 3 ministers better and happier to serve the 1,000 who came for worship and candlelight while their families were at home celebrating. It looks like service of the board members who are navigating changes and decisions in the church, meeting sometimes 2 or 3 times a week now to help get this transition with Aaron's departure right. To the racial equity leaders crafting new conversations for us to explore what racism means in today's world, to the pastoral care volunteers who do so many things to reach out to you. These are all disciplines of a commitment that build community. All these people know that discipline to a commitment shows us that we can improve by practice and deepen relations and connections. And it pushes us not only to live out on our own paths alone and suffering and enduring the fight, but toward each other, living toward each other, toward loving opportunities to make the world a better place, toward never giving up or running away, but going toward the love that sustains us. That is what the church is about. Those who come and walk with us know how the whole of us pulls each individual toward disciplines of the heart, toward loving each other stronger, toward seeking the Spirit deeper in life, even when we struggle, and maybe especially when we struggle. I heard a story that's not about a church that does this disciplining of commitment and community. It's a story of the Other Side Academy and Moving Company, ex-felons and recovering drug addicts in Utah and Colorado. Their motto is that we used to take your things out the window and now we take them out the front door. The website says, we are rebuilding our lives by moving yours. These felons and recovering drug addicts are called students in the academy, where hard work is part of the healing process, where they live in communal houses, and in the evening they play games, accountability discussions really, calling each other to the agreed upon values of honesty and trust and loyalty. You see, the other side movers, they're working toward a discipline of commitment that not only saves individual lives, but creates community and then expands their trust and their good work into the world. What they are doing is promoting in each other eulogy virtues, as David Brooks puts it, not resume virtues. Resume virtues are things that you do. Eulogy virtues are things that you'd like to be remembered for. David Brooks says that to develop your eulogy virtues and find transcendent happiness, you have to make yourself strong in your broken places. He is quoting Hemingway here. He is quoting a piece from Hemingway's famous book that came from an experience he had in 1918 Well before Hemingway was writing for the New Yorker, Hemingway was volunteering on the Italian front for the American Red Cross as an ambulance driver. And one day he was handing out chocolate and cigarettes to soldiers when a mortar struck him and those he was serving. His leg was blown open. He regained consciousness and shoved cigarettes into the gaping wound to clot the bleeding, and then carried the badly injured soldiers next to him to a nearby medical tent. For his bravery, he was given an award of valor from the Italian government. From this experience and his experience of recovery from this terrible event, and falling in love with a woman he met there, a nurse, he wrote A Farewell to Arms. The piece that claims very clearly the two sides of recovering from pain and disappointment are love and companionship as the cure, and commitment as the way. This is where self-discipline and self-reflection is key. Self-discipline is required to make any sort of commitment to a life partner, to a community, or to a vocation. But it's within these commitments that one's passion lies, and I would say one's salvation. Beth read a poem today that points to the very essence of what I'm talking about. Carrie Williams Clifford wrote this beautiful poem, an echo of history from a black woman who lived and thrived in the early 1900s against all odds. She wrote, "So we'll walk the way of life, you and I, love, both together, storm or sunshine, happy we if be foul or fair the weather." The key word in her poem is together. The discipline of commitment and the commitment of discipline leads us not to our own strength for our own sake, but toward one another in love and transparency and honesty, as it does in this church. And that is what the church is teaching and pulling you towards. Pulling you in strength and love toward your own ability to help others and expand the mission of a loving community, not a collection of solo travelers, but a community committed to the discipline of love, the discipline and the blessing of discipline of love. The South African female poet, Gadifeli Kilele, whose name means endless summit, writes, "Stronger together, we are stronger together than on our own. We need each other. We are family. We support each other. We guide each other. We teach each other. We restore each other. We are leaders, not losers. We are givers, not seekers. We are stronger together." I say that discipline and the discipline of your commitments will make you stronger, but better than that, will make us stronger. So the question today, to be discussed in just a moment at our coffee hour, is what commitments of discipline lead you to being stronger together, lead you into communities that lead you to a stronger heart, a heart of love and community. In Lent, we ponder these things. We strive toward the love of life and its rewards. And so may the Spirit of love first pull you toward each other and toward us, and toward salvation for us all. Amen and amen.